I'm doing really great, Hunter. Thank you so much for having me. What's up, Power to Fly community? So great to see you all again.
Welcome back. Where are you calling in from?
So I'm in LA.
Beautiful Los Angeles. That's my hometown, originally from there, born and raised.
Awesome. It is sunny and windy today, but
Okay,
sunny
hopefully not too
nonetheless.
windy. Yeah.
Yes.
So I read a little bit about your intro there, but I'd love to hear more about you and let us into your world a little bit.
Sure. So I've had the privilege, really, for the last 30 years of being on the front lines of people's leaderships and hopes and dreams and aspirations. The work that we do at Move the Crowd is really rooted in purpose. We help people stay true, get paid, and do good. And this new book, which we're thrilled and honored to have come out in May of this year, is called Intentional Ambition. And the inspiration for this book for me was really about recognizing that beyond the data and the sound bites, that there was a lot about the Great Resignation that we, in fact, did not unpack. A
Mm,
lot of layers and layers of lived experience in the lives and centers of everyday people from all walks of life, at all backgrounds, at every level of work. And when we got the call to come back, we already know it was a hot mess. If we can keep it real, it was a hot
mhm,
mess.
mhm.
And a lot of us didn't quite understand why, and I think we didn't understand that from a personal perspective. And certainly from an organizational perspective. I remember speaking with a chief people officer in the thick of the return to work kind of mandate, and they had done a survey, and these are, tens of thousands of employees, and only 4% wanted to come back to the office, right? And
Mm.
so there was a real opportunity to understand what are the narratives and the sub narratives that are living inside of what it is that we've experienced over the last 5 years, right? We've been in a sea of change. And whether your pandemic was, thought provoking, or whether your pandemic was exhausting, um, we're all different now. Hello. And
Yep.
that requires new terms and conditions, Hunter, for how we're going to work and our relationship to work, and
Yep.
what does it mean to be thriving and really contributing in the ways that we really all want to, truth be told.
Mm, mm. All of the above, right? I feel like I was exhausted. I was confused. I was scared. I was also strangely empowered because I got to take this time to reassess my values. And it's still, like you said, I don't think there was any immediate unpacking. It's this slow burn, and it can show up sometimes in unexpected, uncomfortable ways. So, how do you help people through that? And what is the unpacking that you want to help people do now? And how do we do it?
Yeah, I think it's so important to name that this is layered and multifaceted and complex, right? Because to your point, you're in an experience where you're now having the room and space to really question, whether it's through breakdown or through breakthrough. You're questioning, like, what do I want?
Yep.
What's going to make me happy? And I want to say that I think there are some core fundamental shifts because of what we've gone through that are really creating this sea of change, and this real opportunity for what I call renegotiation, right? And so,
Mm.
whether it's I'm revisiting and redetermining whether or not I want to do the 2.5 hour commute, to whether or not I want to continue to work for the screaming boss, to whether or not I really think I want that next promotion. Even ambition and success are being redefined. And the intention of the book is really to help us arrive at new terms and conditions, and to create a blueprint for how we do that, right? And the first part of that is we got to understand kind of where we've been. And I talk about this in sort of three stages, right? The first stage is what I call negotiation, which is kind of like we've all come to the table, but we're really operating on somebody else's terms and conditions. Somebody
Mm.
else is setting the standard for what success means and what success looks like. And we are doing everything we can do to thrive with the least amount of risk. right? And I call that navigation. So it's negotiation, aka navigation. Then we hit resignation. And for me, resignation has got two facets. There's resignation 1.0, which is where we become resigned to the fact that this is not going to change, or this is not going to get better, or, we're just going to suck it up and stick it out. And a lot of people are there. Sad to say, we know a lot of people are there. The data shows this, right? And then the other place of resignation is where we get to a place where we kind of go no mas, right? And that's the peace out version of resignation. I call that resignation 2.0. And I actually consider that to be a point of awakening, right? Because it is the place where we finally got clear that the status quo is not going to do it for us anymore. And now becomes the big question of, okay, if I'm saying no to this, what am I saying yes to, right? So it's like the now what, right? So if I've transitioned out of the role, or I've said no to the opportunity, right? Because for some people, it's happening even within the context of them not leaving their organizations, right? But whatever that moment is, we know we need to have something different. And so begins the renegotiation process, is really starting to let go of the old paradigm, the old structure, starting to discover who we are. Who is this new person, right? Or in some cases, this rediscovered person. And then what do they want? And starting to really consider, like, what are the things that we feel are important? What are the things that matter to us? What kind of contribution do we want to make? And actually beginning to start to do that real deal inventory, which is part of the process of renegotiating, right?
So if you've written this book, I'm going to wager to guess you went through this process yourself. Or maybe
I did.
in process. Yeah.
Yes.
So what was the no mas? How did you get to this point of writing this book? Where are you now? Where are you going?
Yeah, so my no mas moment actually came in 2017. It's interesting. My joke is I quit before the pandemic,
It's a good joke.
I mean, my business was booming and growing. I had the privilege to be working and doing the work that was really meaningful to me, but it was the way that I was working that was really creating problems, right? So my business was growing. I'm in the midst of growing my team. I'm also in the midst of caring for my father, who's on his deathbed. And I'm not giving myself room and space to grieve. I'm just throwing myself into work, and I'm trying to utilize the work as a way to avoid dealing with all of what I'm feeling emotionally and mentally and spiritually, right? And I'm trying to force growth, and I'm trying to make everybody happy. I'm trying to be the one. Anybody hear what I'm saying? In school and home and family, right? And I stretched myself to a place of utter and total exhaustion, to a point where I literally could not get off the couch. My crispy was crispy in terms of being burnt out, right? And it forced me to have to reconcile with a lot of things. When we talk about, again, that this is layered, this was layered, right? I had to look at a fundamental level, why was I pushing myself so hard? What was it that I was not really trying to deal with, right? And not address in my life, in my family, in my relationships, as it relates to my health and well-being, as it relates to the way that I'm working. Because I feel like even for those of us who are doing things we're passionate about, there is still sometimes a way that we work that is rooted in depletion, that is rooted in self-neglect, that is rooted in, and it has a lot to do with the story of success that we've all bought into. And so I do challenge that in the book. I challenge hard work is the holy grail. And it's interesting, Hunter, because every time I say that, I almost duck, because I know it's coming, because so much of our identity is built around hard work. There are deep cultural roots in hard work. There are deep spiritual, religious roots in hard work. But I think all of us are asking, to what end? And I feel that the pandemic and our experience of the pandemic brought home in so many ways the way in which we had been neglecting ourselves in service to a culture that never turns off and never powers down. And I think because of that, because of the stress of that, and because of the fatigue of that, I know at least in my case, I had to kind of question everything. And I literally took my work ethic back to the studs and sort of went, what's going to enable me to be my best? What's going to enable me to do my best? And what are the choices and decisions that I'm making that support me in being able to do that versus what are the choices and decisions I'm making that are challenging that? Right. And it's caused me to challenge a lot of the standard of, kind of what we know and have come to expect, from the 100-hour work week to, you work when you're sick, you work, right. Your family gets deprioritized, like all of the things that actually create more imbalance and actually, I believe, threaten and challenge our ability to be productive and contribute in ways that are meaningful.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that personal part of your story. I'm sorry for your loss with your father as well. There's there's no comparison to losing a parent. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for that. And thank you for your vulnerability, your radical vulnerability. I'm excited to read the book. Sounds like as confrontational as it going to be for me. It doesn't sound like you're I can tell, you mentioned your family, like I know like I'm getting maternal, like it's gonna be okay, but also I'm gonna get some tough love in this book.
Yeah, you read it right. You read
I
it
see you.
100%. But the thing I also want to say, because, sometimes I get this question of like, is it anti-organization? And not at all.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
It's more about how do we have the real honest and important and difficult conversations that are actually going to support everyone getting better and
Right.
everything getting better. And I think, one of the breakthrough opportunities that we're going to have is being able to challenge these things that have traditionally been like the Holy Grail,
Yeah. You said earlier about taking your work ethic and your priorities down to the studs. And you mentioned making everybody happy. I identify as a recovering people pleaser. Recovering, right? It's a work in progress for me. And that level of exhaustion that you're speaking to, I hear you, I see you, I've been there too. And you said earlier it's a layered experience. And I'm curious, how did you go down to the studs? How did you rebuild? What is that internal process? It's a spiritual process, it's a holistic process. How do you do all of that?
Yeah. I mean, there are 3 R's I'm going to offer up in this. And this is kind of the renegotiation process that I walk through in the book, which is the first thing is to reclaim. And in order to reclaim, part of it is understanding what definition of success have I bought into? And whose is it?
Mm.
Is it mine? Is it my grandfather's? Is it my mother's? Is it my culture's? Is it my spiritual leaders? Is it my boss? Like whose agenda or whose blueprint have I bought into? And what elements or aspects of that blueprint have really empowered me? And what elements of that blueprint are maybe challenging me in ways that are not healthy? Right. And so I say, we have to begin with the narrative because that is what often fuels the choices and the decisions and the behaviors that we make and create. Right. In other words, we're always operating in service to something. And we got to understand first and foremost what that is. And then we have to kind of go, okay, which stories do I want to keep? And which stories do I want to retire? And which stories do I want to create newly for myself that are really going to support this new chapter of contribution of life and work for me? So the reclaiming process is a deeply spiritual process. It is a deeply healing process. It is a reconciliation process, no question. And that's like what sets then the foundation. Because once I
Mm,
know what story I want to guide or what definition of success I want to live into, then everything else becomes okay, what operates in service to that. The second R is realign. And
mm,
this is the values conversation. One of the biggest struggles that I think people navigated in the context of the pandemic and their relationship with work was the places where our values were at a disconnect or at odds with either the way we were working or the kind of work we were doing or the environment even that we were in. And so in the realignment process, this is a place where we get to tell the truth about what's working and not working.
mm,
We get to take responsibility for what we want to be different. And we get to begin to look at where are the frontiers of our life and work that actually are begging to be transformed. And
mm,
so in the book, I walk you through 6 frontiers. They're all related to the different aspects of life. What's powerful about that process when people go through it is you start to see the interconnectivity, right? So
mm,
it's kind of like if I'm not really taking care of my health and well-being, then my ability to contribute at work is compromised. If I'm not in healthy relationships, then my ability to be able to communicate in the ways that I want to communicate are compromised. And you start to sort of see a way the ripple effects occur, right? So I think the other, in addition to the hard work, Holy Grail, we're also challenging our ability to really be siloed and that we really have this ability to separate and compartmentalize in ways
mhm,
that are not really accurate, given everything that I think we've all started to see and recognize when we start to look at burnout and stress and fatigue and mental health and all of the challenges we're seeing that are showing up in the context of our relationship with work. And so we got to do that reconciliation process, that realignment process. And the values piece is critical because it also asks us not only what is important to us in terms of where we want to put our time and attention or energy, but in what way do we want to matter? In what way do we want to make a difference? In what way can we make environments better as we think about the nature of our work and the way that we're being called to work?
mm,
And that takes us to the third R, which is reimagine, right? And this is kind of like if you had your way, what would it look like? Who would you
mhm,
be working with? What would you be working on? What would you want to be forwarding? And this drives up impact and purpose and meaning, which we know is a central desire and aspiration for people in the workplace. We want to do things that make a difference. We want to know that we're moving the needle. We want to know that we're here for a reason, that we're not just taking up air and space, right? And so that's the renegotiation process. And that was what I had to do in order to be able to come back in a way that was really clear about the difference I wanted to be and make in how I was working.
mm. I imagine there's many people that are everyone's in one of those stages right now, right? And I can imagine for where we are timeline wise that many of us are in the realignment stage. And I'm curious if you could speak to folks listening in some tips of what they could do today, some small actionable check-ins for realignment.
Yeah, the first big part about realignment is you got to take a step back. And this is hard because often we're finding that when we're in a culture of work and when we're in a culture of demands, right, or in a sea of demands, we will go from work to family to anybody hear what I'm saying, to community, to, and not a breath in between. And it's very difficult to get clear about where things are working and where things are not working if you haven't had space to stop.
Mm,
And so one of the big things that I recommend is even if it's 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes at night, 5 minutes in the middle of the day, be bold. Maybe you give yourself all 3 5-minute intervals, but you actually are stepping back. So maybe you're starting your morning in quiet. You're just giving yourself 5 minutes of quiet. Maybe that's journaling. Maybe that's walking the dog.
Mm.
My husband does this cold brew moment in the morning where he literally just kind of looks out the window and and he just sips his coffee, right? But it's 5 minutes of total silence, and he's just grounding and centering and regrouping and getting clear about what kind of day he wants to have. And it's little, but it's very meaningful if we engage in these kinds of things as a practice, right? 5 minutes in the middle of the day where you're having your lunch and maybe you're not on your phone because you've been on your computer and you've been on all these other things. You've been in back-to-back meetings. You've been rescuing and saving the day all over the office, right? Like, go
Yeah.
outside. Let the
Yep.
sun hit your face for 5 minutes, y'all. We can
Yeah.
do it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and just reset,
Yep.
have a real lunch, meaning eat your meal in a
Mhm.
mindful way where you're
Mhm.
just enjoying the taste of your salad or the taste of your burger or whatever it is, and you're chewing and you're just being quiet and you're just taking it in, and you're really allowing yourself to do that as opposed to utilizing that as an opportunity to get a quick couple of emails in, and then
Mm.
you feel exhausted by the end of the day. The other
Right.
thing is wrapping your night, and I will tell you, this was massive for me, actually creating a stop time for work
Yeah.
and really sort of saying that after XX hour, I'm off. All the devices are off. All the conversations around business are done. And I'm giving myself at least an hour to unwind
Yes.
before I go to bed.
Yep.
Right. So, just three really, really simple things that give you the space to then begin to examine and
Mm.
reflect on
Mm.
what's going on, right?
Yep.
And then that second piece is like, as you're in that reflection, telling the truth about what's working and not working, even if you're not quite ready to address it, there's something about our ability to be truthful with ourselves.
Mm.
I also think is an outgrowth of the pandemic, right? An honesty, a kind of unflinching honesty that we've started to cultivate with ourselves that becomes critically important when we start to think about the way in which we want to reimagine and the way in which we want to come back as we cultivate those new terms and conditions, right? So those are just a couple things.
Couple of very powerful things. And what I love about that last one is I find the more that I do that for me, I invite it around me. You were vulnerable with me. I was like, you know what? I'm going to be vulnerable with you right now. You gave me permission, right? It was safe.
Yes.
And we can do that for each other. And I feel I've had exponentially more vulnerable conversations with people in my community, with people I don't know,
Yeah.
post-pandemic than pre-pandemic.
100%. And I want to say this because I think, again, we start to talk about the old paradigm. There was a way in which many of us have been conditioned to believe that the truth is not welcome. And therefore, we're not telling it to ourselves and we're not telling it to each other. And the real deal is that one of the most compassionate things we can do is tell ourselves and each other the truth,
Mm.
because it's only then that we have the opportunity to make anything better, right? And so, in this renegotiation process, you being willing to offer that truth, to your point, gives other people permission to do the same. And you do then create this space that becomes more generous and
Mm.
more courageous, which is where I think the solutions lie. In other words, generosity and courage is what I think is going to be required to reconcile and to move us into a new paradigm where more people can thrive.
Yeah. We just want to be seen. We just want to be heard. We just want to be understood.
Yes. And I'm going to be bold and say loved. Like
Yeah.
like we want to care and we want to be cared for. And
Yes.
we can do it, y'all. Like we
Yeah.
totally can.
Yeah. And asking for help is so hard. I think that's another cultural barrier, toughen up, stiff upper lip, pull up your bootstraps, all of that stuff. And it's like, we, uh, I think I was conditioned, even though I had a very supportive family, I grew up in Los Angeles, and yet I still associated asking for help with failure.
Yeah.
And
And
it's continual unlearning.
right, that part. The old story is begging to be retired, right? And a new story wants to be born that I think will enable contributors to exponentially increase the kind of positive impact they can have in their respective organizations and ventures, right? And it's really now about how do we have those important critical conversations that enable us to unlearn what
Mm,
we're being invited to unlearn in service to a more healthy and thriving system of work. And I think that's what this moment is all about. I think that's what the renegotiation that so many of us are in the midst of is all about. And the more that we can encourage it, the more I think we'll get a future that really will enable more of us to thrive.
mm. Well, Ra, this has been absolutely amazing. Thank you for your compassion and your willingness to go there with me today. I feel very grounded right now with you. This has been really wonderful. I'm getting a little teary-eyed. I'm not gonna lie.
This is my joy, Hunter. This is what I do.
Yeah.
This is what I
Your
do.
name says it all.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. It's a joy to talk to you today.
Likewise. And if people want to keep the conversation going with you, if they want to get a copy of your book, where do they do that? How do they stay in touch?
So the book is called Intentional Ambition, and it's on all of the major book outlets. I invite you in whatever way you want to reach out to your local booksellers or, the big Amazons and Barnes and Nobles of the world. Please, by all means, do that. And then you can stay in touch with, I'm on everything at Rha Goddess, and it's RHA, and then Goddess, Goddess. And we will have goodies. We will have a link for you to share with the Power to Fly community, and we will have goodies for those of you who want to step into the pre-sale opportunity. We'll have workshops and workbooks and other things that will surround the book, because this is something also we invite people to do together, right? We
Mm,
know that so much of what we're healing, even coming out of the pandemic, is isolation. And that was another big, big, big learning for so many of us. And we're in a moment now where community is redefining itself like never before because of all of the chaos and uncertainty of our world. And so this is an opportunity to be in community and do this work. And so, again, we'll share all the goodies and all the links, and we invite you to join and lean in with us. It'd be our honor to serve you.
fantastic. Well, you can look forward to my LinkedIn request.
Thank you. Done.
Thank you, Ra. It was great to meet you. Please come back. Let's do this again.
Thank you, Hunter. My joy. Have a great day, you all.
You too.